Well, recently, a team of researchers announced a groundbreaking discovery beneath Egypt's Giza Plateau, a vast complex of underground chambers, shafts extending nearly 2 kilometers under the famous pyramids. Italian Scottish researchers claim they discovered a vast underground city under these pyramids using synthetic aperture radar. Is that the truth? Dr. Kathy Forty has actually been there. She's been beneath the pyramids. She's authored, quote, "The Real Truth, My Time Spent Under the Sphinx and Great Pyramid." She has a big trip planned for the fall to return to the water tunnels underneath the pyramids. And we thought, who better to ask about the validity of this and her adventures than Dr. Kathy Forty herself. Doctor, welcome to the show. Great to see you.
Hi, thank you, Clayton. Glad to be here. I've
So,
Egypt is the only thing you could say is Egypt is the atomic bomb of ancient history.
what do you mean by that?
So much has been lost, hidden, or rewritten about, man's origins and civilizations and so forth. And so much truth is buried under the Egyptian sand, that it's starting to point to much more people are accepting the fact that there was probably some pre-dynastic civilizations that might have been more advanced. And, they were prior to much older civilizations that even came before that. So all that is hidden, and space technology is really kind of the great revealer right now. And it's kind of hard to put the back in the box, you might say, what's coming out. Now, the thing with the SARS scans that happened in March of this year was that immediately they used microwave waves of what do you call it to reflections so that they were able to discover what was underneath the pyramids. And the controversy was basically that this type of technology can only look at what is shallow under the ground, not deeper. And the images that they were getting back, the 3D images, were of buildings that looked, that was something that was 10 times the height of the Empire State Building. So that's where they started to try to debunk the fact is that what is the software algorithms that are producing these images, are they actually accurate? So you see how they kind of throw that into the mix that, okay, we can debunk it because the science is not showing us correctly, and missing the whole point that many people for years have talked about, that there is a city underneath there. There are buildings under buildings. And, it's sort of like older is deeper, they say. When they talk about sacred temples in Egypt, they mean that there's another older temple underneath it, and yet there might be another older temple underneath that older temple. So many things have been lost over the years. And so, it's like space archaeology is starting to blow the lid off that. I mean, you can't dig anywhere on the Giza Plateau without a permit. In fact, you can't dig anywhere in Egypt without a permit, and much stricter on the Giza Plateau. You can be thrown in prison or get steep fines for it. And yet, everybody has dug under their house at some time, and everybody has their own little cache of Egypt antiquities that they've found, and they kind of hide them and, store them and so forth like that. But the first time I was in Egypt, I remember reading about the story of a man that dug 30 feet down under his house. I'm not sure why he was digging that low, but he ran into tunnels. And immediately he was in prison, he jailed, and because they know that their tunnels are all under the Giza Plateau and other parts of Egypt as well, which I'll get into the Hawara Pyramid and so forth like that. So a
So
lot of
space
it's been covered.
technology. So it's funny that we're using the space technology that we would be looking towards the stars. Now we're shining it back on ourselves and finding these
Right.
amazing discoveries. So when you saw this report in March, maybe you can help us understand. I mean, maybe you could talk to me like I'm a fifth grader and help me understand this. You're much more steeped in the science than I am. But
Okay.
when you saw this report, what was your initial reaction to seeing that? Wow, there's a vast underground city underneath the Giza Plateau.
Well, everybody knows that in Egypt. That's what was my first thought. Some people have even claimed to have stumbled upon entrances to it. Now, the way I discovered it was not that way. It was a very unusual way. In After I had my near-death experience in 2003, I kept getting these inclinations. It was time to go to Egypt to explore my Egypt roots. And so when I went there, I tried to go during 2011, and the Arab Spring uprising froze everything. I couldn't get there. So I couldn't get there to 2014. And when I did, one of the first things I wanted to do was go into the Great Pyramid. And so we booked a 2 hour time. You can do that in Egypt. Usually it's somewhere between, in after hours when the pyramid closes, and you get the pyramid to yourself for, it's around $2,000 or something like that for 2 hours, which is definitely worth it. And so I was only with three other people. So when I got into the King's Chamber of the Great Pyramid, uh, it's an incredible chamber. I knew immediately it was a sound chamber. And so, I stepped into the sarcophagus. No body has ever been found in there, at least not in the Great Pyramids. And there's no lid on this stone sarcophagus, which is like in the middle of, towards the back of this chamber. And I just got in and I just wanted to find out what the sound was like. So I started toning and chanting and feeling the resonance throughout my body. And then the strangest thing happened. All of a sudden, in my mind's eye, it was like I was taken to another place, and I saw the lid slam shut on the sarcophagus. And that first thought was, "Oh my God, I'm buried alive." And I heard in my head the strangest, this calm saying, "You know what to do." And I realized I did. And immediately I felt myself lift out of my body. I'd had out of body experiences before. And I could see as clear as could be. And it was like the shaft in the bottom of the sarcophagus opened and light was filled. And I was zooming through the pyramids. The first thing I saw was that there was a big space above the grand gallery. Now there's a corbel vaulted ceiling there, but it's a little wider than normal at the very top. It doesn't quite, meet. And I saw there was a void there. Now, it wasn't until a year later in 2015 when they did the Scan the Pyramid project that they saw there was a void, a big void right above the Grand Gallery. But what
So
I saw there,
you saw that in this trance
out of body
experience,
remote viewer experience.
a
Yes.
remote viewing experience a year
Yes.
before they discovered it.
A year before they discovered. But what I saw in there, which I don't know they ever saw in the scans, was there was a smaller pyramid-shaped object inside there. And, if anybody's, has followed uh, the sleeping prophet, Edgar Casey, he talked about there being a capstone, a gold capstone on the pyramid at one time that was like a conductor of electricity, and that it was taken off, they believe, sometime during the time of the pharaoh Akhenaten. And now everybody talks about that the pyramid is really like a piano out of tune. The gold capstone is not there. Now, they're not going to drill into there because obviously they don't want to destroy the ceiling, but that's what I saw. The first thing I saw was that. Then it was like my body was zipping around looking at all through the pyramid. The next thing I found was that I was under the pyramid and there were water tunnels. Now, I had never heard anybody talk about water tunnels under the pyramid. And it was like it almost looked like a river. And the Nile doesn't come anywhere near it. The Nile River is about 5 miles away from it. At one time, it probably did come up there, and up to the actual pyramid. But this one, and I didn't go through the tunnels. It's sort of like all of a sudden my attention was drawn over to something underneath the water, and even deeper yet. And what I saw down there was what looked like a big city. It had passageways. It had big, almost like hippie style type of courtyards. It had columns. It looked like it was somewhat in disarray, but it was deeper down. And I thought, oh my gosh, there's a city underneath the pyramids. And then later I talked to, people I knew in Egypt, and they go, yeah, we all know about that there's a city down there, or there once was a city down there. For what reason?
I spoke yesterday to Congressman Ron Paul, Dr. Ron Paul, and he said, Clayton, we spoke like 30 minutes, and he said, Clayton, he's like, I'm telling you, the U.S. dollar is collapsing. He said, well, we're not going to be having this conversation in 10 years. We're not going to be having the same conversation in 10 years. The U.S. dollar is on a path that is basically irretrievable at this point. And he's like, he's like, I hope you're telling your audience, please make sure that they are investing in gold and silver, that they are owning precious metals, because the U.S. dollar is on an unsustainable path. The rise of the BRICS currencies, the amount of debt that the United States is sitting right now. This isn't a scare tactic. This is a wake-up call. And the thing with like Congressman Ron Paul is that people like retroactively love to point, like they're like, hey, did you see what he said on the floor of Congress 10 years ago? And then it all came to pass. He sees it as unsustainable. I see it as unsustainable. So we are big believers. Please just get on the phone and give our friends at Lear Capital a phone call. Have a conversation with them. Talk to them about how you could actually start investing in precious metals in your family. Like if you've got U.S. dollars, your family's future is tied to U.S. dollars. You've got a savings account. Have a conversation with them seriously about converting it maybe to a self-directed IRA where you can invest in actual tangible things, real estate, gold, silver, all of it. You can do that. But anyway, have a conversation with these guys. Stop sitting on your hands. I'm telling you that this is happening. And we've been trying to warn you about it. Congressman Ron Paul warning people about what's happening to the U.S. dollar. He said, if you want to get a sort of a glimpse of what's going to happen to the U.S. dollar, look at Zimbabwe. If you want to understand how we go bankrupt, what happens to the devaluing of our currency. That's where we're headed right now. So anyway, give them a call, have a conversation with them, even if it's like a little bit in your, in your portfolio that you're trying to protect your family with, converting U.S. dollars into gold or silver, heck, even real estate at this point. Just be smart about it. 1-800-613-3557. Talk to them or go to LearRedacted.com. That's the place to go, LearRedacted.com. What you saw, and this was all through remote viewing, right? Everything you saw. So when you saw these scans come out in these pictures, we'll just throw them up on the screen, some of these renderings, I guess you could say, with these giant columns, with these sort of like cylindrical coil columns going down. Did that look similar to what you saw or different?
No. No, now remember, that's not exactly what may be down there. That's what their algorithm in their software did a 3D modeling. So it's not exactly right, but I did see columns down there. Those columns looked awfully tall, and I don't remember them being that tall. But it's sort of like it was dark down there. So I was seeing with my remote viewing eyes all of this that was going, and it went on for, it looked huge, and I knew there was no way I was going to cover it. The next thing I found myself going down this passageway that actually led into the Sphinx. So I realized at some time that must have been how they got into the pyramid, through the Sphinx. And then I found myself shooting out the head of the Sphinx, only later to find out there actually is a hole on the top of the head of the Sphinx.
Wow.
And someone in my small little group leaned over in real life, the edge of the sarcophagus, and said, "Kathy, are you done in there yet?" And immediately I was kind of sucked back into my physical body. So I don't know what would have happened at that point had I kept going. But, that became, curiosity is what keeps you young, and it can also get you in a lot of trouble. But from then on, I discovered that I really wanted to get down to those water tunnels in real life and find out.
And now you are. So now is that right? That expedition happens in November of this year, right?
No. I actually been there. So the first time I was there.
But
yes,
you're going back there. Okay. You're going back there again.
Going back. And and that's, by the way, that's a private group. That's not a public group in full. So, so when I went back, we had to do a lot of negotiations with the Egyptian government, obviously, the Department of Antiquities. And first of all, they wanted to know how I knew about them. I was a nobody. I was no Egyptologist or archaeologist or anything like that. And just this curious woman. And they had there is something underneath the causeway. It's an opening underneath the causeway to the Great Pyramid, under the Khafre Causeway. And it was discovered it was called the Osiris Shaft, and it was discovered in 1933 by the Egyptian Egyptologist Dr. Salim Hassan. But he kind of ran out of resources and money, so nothing ever came of it. And then it was in 1945 rediscovered, but again, no excavation was done, nothing. And then in, I believe it was 2008, Dr. Zawi Hawass rediscovered it, but then again, nothing was written about it. So it went way under the radar. So anytime people don't talk about something, it's a red flag. There's something there to be looked at. So we did our negotiations. We finally agreed. I kind of feel like they were checking me out. Who is this girl? And and I kind of the energy. I'm nobody. I'm just curious. And and so it was 4:30 in the morning with myself, the head of the Giza Plateau, a good one of my Egyptologist friends, and of course a security guard with one flashlight going across the Giza Plateau. Dark as could be. You could trip on anything, and we get to this iron doorway that's under the causeway, and he hands me the key, says, "You want to open it?" And I said, "Of course I do." So,
So wait,
um,
just let me back up. This is amazing. This to me, this is like the stuff of my dreams to be able to do this. Like holding a lantern, like walking through, and someone hands you a key inside the pyramids, and there's an iron door underneath the roadway that leads up to the Sphinx, and leads up, and then of course the Great and the
yeah, you
Giza
could see it
Plateau.
in the
So
background, the
yeah,
pyramid and the Sphinx and so forth like that. And I mean, everything goes deep down. The bedrock is goes down for like what seems like forever down there. And yeah, the even the key was one of those keys that was looked like from an old ancient mansion or something like that. It was an iron key. So on the first level was very arid and dry. There was not much there except something over an opening, a hole in the ground that looks sort of like a tent frame, which they must have at some time during when Dr. Salim Hassan did his thing in 1933. Yeah, I got to get that fly, Clayton. Uh,
oh, we're in a deep we're under the ground here in our studio, and somehow there's a fly in here. I don't know. Maybe it's the story that we're talking about. I don't know how that got down here. They went through an
okay.
iron gate for crying.
So they had obviously put down some electricity, some lighting down there. Not a lot, just kind of a light bulb in the wall and the ceiling, and that's it. So that we weren't in the total dark. And so I was the first time they put down some iron ladders, and that were already there back from 1933, I believe. And so I was the first to go down the ladders. I didn't. It was like I was so excited to get to the second level. And and we're talking about if when you get all the way down to the actual water level, it's like about 150 feet total. So when I got down to the second level, there was a room there with seven recessed niches in the wall where big sarcophagi had been placed at one time, and there was two sarcophagi there. The lids were open, and they were looked like they were made of some type of lava basalt. Didn't look like black granite. And seven, to me, I immediately thought of the seven gods of the underworld and the afterlife. This might be a symbolic floor for all that. And I remember having looked inside the one of the sarcophaguses and looked at the seams, and there was still what looked like a little bit of resin material on the seams, and it looked like it had been slip cast,
What does
which
that mean?
slip cast meaning that they might have ground up the basalt or whatever the material is, brought it down there, put it in a slip cast, let it harden, and then release the slip cast. And that's how, and I believe that that may be how they have gotten a lot of those old stones down there.
Hmm.
I mean, if we go and look even at the pyramids, all the inner stones are all coarse, and there's fingernails in them, and hair strands and so forth. So we know that those weren't totally um, stone quarried. That was some type of mixture. So, but that's a
Hmm.
whole other thing on cement, which we have not been able to quite figure out how they made their cement compounding and so forth. But anyway, so getting back to to the second level, The Egyptians are very big on the afterlife and the underworld. They believe you have to go through these 12 gates, and you're riding a solar boat, and you have to pass all these tests. So I think that this second level was a very symbolic level because at one time I believe they may have done rituals of this nature when maybe a pharaoh was passing or so forth like that, or and then when I went down to the third level, that's where the water was. And it was almost at the bottom rung of the ladder. And I could see a tunnel in the distance and a sarcophagus underneath the water. And it was a stone slab and it had markings on it and design markings. And I asked the head of the Giza Plateau, has anyone ever tried to open this or have they opened this? And he said, no. Perhaps because if you opened it, it would flood what's ever underneath it. And the water, as far as I could see, close to where we were, it was about hip deep. And there was a pier, kind of a makeshift pier that had been set up there probably for the excavation back in 1933. You could see papyrus in the water and pieces of driftwood or wood in general. And so I was prepared to take a water sample. I did not tell anybody I was going to take this water sample just in case they told me I couldn't. So, which the interesting thing was that the uh, the water in the air felt slightly electrified down there. So I did have a magnometer and it was reading us somewhat high. So there's there's accumulation of electrical pockets down there. Now that's not my expertise, but when I took the water sample, I took the bottles out of I had prepared the bottles, according to what the lab told me to do. And when I took it out of my backpack, my room key to the Mina house flew out of my backpack. I mean, it was the strangest thing and flew right onto the sarcophagus in the water, buried. And so,
Like magnetically?
I don't know. I don't know. I've never seen anything. Usually, when something drops out of your backpack, it drops straight down to the ground. But this
Right.
flew out. So that's a good thing. I mean, it's a good question. Was it because of the magnetic strip or anything of that nature? I don't know. But we couldn't get it out. So to this day, my room key from the Mina house is still on that slab years later, unless somebody has
Wow.
fished it out. Um, they couldn't reach it because it just got deeper into the silt. So I when I did get the samples back to a lab in Pasadena, California, they ran a number of tests on it, and it was high in sodium and chloride. And now the interesting thing is, like, where was this salt water coming from? We looked at, was it leaching off the walls? And they poo-pooed that. They said, no, that wouldn't be because what they were seeing. And so we had to start looking, well, where's the source of this water coming from? Because the Nile is fresh water. And as I said
Right.
before, the Nile is now 5 miles away from the pyramid. Well, about a year after that, they found out that there is a hidden branch to the Nile River that flows underneath there. And due to a tectonic shift or sand shifting, it blocked off the flow of the river. So that could be the source. It's still there, but it's just been blocked off from the main river. But I still was not quite satisfied because the fact is that freshwater versus saltwater, seawater, and it's not near the Mediterranean. So I started searching for any saltwater um, bodies of water that might have been nearby. And about 50 miles southwest of Cairo is a pyramid called Hawara. Now, Hawara, and there's right near it was a Lake Morris. And Lake Morris, somewhere in time, changed from freshwater to seawater. And no one knows how or when or so forth. But the Hawara Pyramid, which is right near it, is heavily guarded by the military because there is a labyrinth underneath it. And it sounds so much like what I saw underneath the Great Pyramids. And this labyrinth has been known since Herodotus's time in the 5th century. You know, he was a historian, so this is not new. So in 2000, I believe it was 2015, the scientists Klaus Dona and Dr. Carmen Bolter, she's been known for the docuseries The Pyramid Code. She's deceased now, but they went and they sort of secretly did some ground penetrating radar. And they found that there was 3 huge levels under the Hawara period. And the Hawara period doesn't look like anything like the Great Pyramid. It looks like it's been kind of smashed down, made of mud brick, and obviously not as old as the Great Pyramid. And they found that these 3 levels contained 9 acres of passageways, 82 rooms, 12 huge halls that were the size of football fields. And none of
What?
these, yes, and none of these layers were connected. And the interesting thing was there was a canal of water running above them. So they couldn't, and there's no way that they could excavate this because anything from that water source would then destroy and damage what was underneath it. So, I started to look and says, well, why are we finding so much water sources under pyramids? And so I started looking at other pyramids around the world, which, are anywhere from 10,000 to 12,000 years old. So, the claims of the Great Pyramid being 3,000 years old are just ridiculous. And they claim their oldest pyramid in Egypt is the Step Pyramid, 4,500 years old. So when I looked at these other, I saw that the Chichen Itza, the pyramid in Cozumel, has water tunnels under it. It has a lake, in fact, underneath it. The Bosnian pyramids have water under, and so does Teotihuacan in Mexico. So you have to, wonder, these were built for water sources. Why were they built for water sources unless the pyramid was some type of power plant that
A
generated,
power plant, like a conduit. You
like
talk
a
about
wireless power plant?
a wireless power plant with a gold capstone on top,
Yes.
a focused sort of energy power plant. So my mind is racing with this now. So underneath the Giza plateau, then we have these water sources deep, deep, deep beneath. Do you believe that those water sources would sit like underneath the large sort of underground city, or would they be above it, like you saw south of
They
Giza?
had to be above it because remember when I saw the water tunnels, then I was drawn to something even deeper than that. So it made sense, just like the Hawara, there was water stuff above the other civilization layers.
This is
So,
crazy.
and
So with the Hawara temple or pyramid, we have confirmation of this,
oh
right?
yeah,
With what you've seen now through remote viewing is very similar, but we don't have physical. We haven't been able to lay eyeballs on it yet. So it's very possible then that there could be a water system, a canal system underneath the Giza plateau that's massive, and this massive underground city would sit beneath the canal system.
yes. I kind of sat and meditated on what this could be because I had a feeling it was somehow linked to Hawara, the Great Pyramid. And I could see a ceremony, almost like a solar boat ceremony, underneath these canal rivers, underneath coming to the Great Pyramid. And, I think that that sarcophagus is some type of, I bandy around the word portal, but, some type of energetic portal or so forth like that, because a lot of electromagnetic energy is in certain inner chambers and at the base of the pyramid. So, electrical energy has accumulated there, and that's probably the charge I felt. The water felt somewhat charged, the air felt somewhat charged. And, I'm not a scientist in that respect, but I'm an observer, a good observer, and I can feel energy,
Right.
and I can tell the difference in it. So, I guess after my near-death experience, I became much more sensitive to those type of things. So, and I started looking at back at the King's Chamber. And I learned that that is heat fused stone. It looks like it's been heated up, And, it's a sound chamber. There's no doubt about it. Nobody's going to, it's a wonder that, but sound used in certain ways can create tremendous amounts of heat. And apparently, that
And
it has
movement, right? I
moved.
mean, there
Yes,
has
and
been
movement.
the most important thing that you can do to protect your family today is to protect them from cyber criminals and online predators. I mean, it is disgusting, this new era that we're living in. And there's one app that does it all. It's called Bunker. That's right. Bunker is developed by experts with 25 years of experience catching criminals and fighting cybercrime. They created Bunker to protect their own family, and now they're sharing it with you. What do you get with a Bunker family plan? Well, you get a private messenger to share messages, photos, and files with your spouse, your children, connecting only people that you approve. No spam, no surveillance, no imposters ever. Password Manager, they also provide you to safeguard your family's online accounts, including financial, shopping, streaming, social media. And they've created a vault that will securely store everything for your family: wedding photos, baby pictures, special memories, financial information. You've got pictures of your IDs, birth certificates, passports, tax documents, wills, trust, insurance, all of it in that vault. So visit bunker.life/redacted and use the code redacted for 25% off your family plan. Friend of the show, Nick Redfern, has written a whole book on how he believes the pyramids were built using a sound vibration and resonance. So sound has, we've all seen the experiments where you have vibrations and sand on a drum head moves into perfect circles and all sorts of shapes, and so the power of sound is massive, that I don't think a lot of people are aware of. Would that have something to do with it?
Yeah, well, I think that they were acoustically tuned for certain types of frequencies to generate sound. Now, apparently, there's been expansion in the stone in the King's Chamber about 1 to 2 inches upward and about 3 inches laterally. And what causes something like that? You have to kind of ask yourself. I mean, it looks like kind of like there's nothing in it that would resemble a tomb. I've been in many tombs in Egypt, in the Valley of the Kings and so forth like that, and none of them look like the King's Chamber. That's for sure. I believe it was some type of power plant, and they needed water to generate that. They probably used to conduct energy to generate lightning, thunderstorms, and so forth like that, with the capstone. And it's I think that they probably may have used it for terraforming weather and so forth like that. Everything has shifted in the world. We don't realize how much our Earth has changed. In the Fayum Oasis, you're going to find underneath the sand whale bones and fossilized fish, saying that this at one time was an ocean. And now it's the Sahara Desert. So you have to start looking at the Younger Dryas period, when the ice sheets melted and rainfall started, and then it became much more fertile for agriculture and farmland. And then about 5300 BC, something in the earth shifted again and it returned to an arid, dry desert. So, yeah, all that stuff is kind of hidden. And, we think of climate change, oh, but the earth is cyclical. It goes through these shifts, and things change, and we lose civilizations, we lose history, we lose all these things that, are really important. So,
I mean, we're seeing that happening right now in Italy. I've been warning our audience about what's coming to southern Italy with the more than 25 volcanoes that are set to explode. We know what happened in Pompeii, an entire civilization frozen in time. So these things can shift on a dime. Have you figured out? I mean, I don't think you have, but I mean, I'm just curious the application or the harnessing of this energy. So we've got a pyramid, waterway underneath, like maybe even salt water underneath, sound resonance, a gold capstone. How exactly might they have harnessed this energy? We think of like power plants and so forth, and it actually kind of seems like if you think about our power plants that we use, it seems very archaic compared to this, doesn't it? It almost sounds like this is far more advanced than anything we currently have.
Well, you have to look at the pre-dynastic Egypt, which a lot of people don't like to talk about. What came before the ancient Egypt? Obviously, there was a civilization there that was much more advanced that may have been lost in the big biblical flood that we've all know about, and maybe that's why the Fayum Oasis at one time was an ocean. And so you have to look back at some of the ancient manuscripts looking towards, they talked about places called Atlantia, Atlantia, um, Atlantis, and these were probably much more advanced civilization, and a lot of their information was lost. I mean, I looked when I came to Egypt, I found this unusual green glass that they would sell, the vendors would sell, and I was like, oh, this is really pretty. It looked like fused old Coca-Cola bottle glass or something, and I said, where'd it come from? They said the Sahara Desert or one of the deserts there. It's like a sheet of glass. And I said, "Well, what's a sheet of glass, of green glass, doing in the desert and certain patches?" And then I started looking into it and found that a scientist who was involved in the atomic bomb tests in Nevada said that when they did the atomic bomb test, the silica in the sand turned to green glass. And I was like, oh my God, centuries ago, thousands of years ago, they must have had what was equivalent to atomic weaponry. And perhaps maybe that's what did them in. If it wasn't, a tilting of the Earth's axis, and we know that scientists have said that we've had a number of Earth axis tilts, and land has gone down, land has come up. Off of Japan, you can find underwater pyramids, and I think this earlier civilization probably built a lot of these pyramids that they carbon dated or however they do it, and it's like 12,000 years old, which they believe the Sphinx is 12,500 years old. Of course, not the Egyptians. And I believe Edgar Cayce said the Great Pyramid was about 10,500 years old, and the Sphinx came before it. But this civilization may have planted all these underground cities, which may have not been underground during their time, and probably stored knowledge. So, in case it was lost, because they were always looking to the stars, where the stars were for flood periods and everything else. And they probably thought, well, maybe there's going to be another inundation that might wipe us out. We need to preserve knowledge. So, they put all these outposts around the world in other pyramids, and made other pyramids that look very much similar to it, but some are underwater now. So
Would
it
you
leaves
think
you a
that
lot to
these
think about.
outposts, yeah, I mean these cities. So do you think that they were always underground? Is that the idea that these, if there are
I don't
large,
know.
massive cities underneath the pyramids, that they were always there? They were always underground underneath these canals, or were they at some point open
That's a
air
good
and
question.
out in the
I
sun?
don't know. They could have been above ground, just like some of one of my favorite temples is Abydos, and there's one spot in it where you can see a column underneath the ground from the existing temple. But how many underneath that? So that had to have been a one time exposed to the air. And maybe the shifting sands buried it. I mean, the Sphinx does not look anything like it did back in the 1800s. I mean, it looked like a little snake, the body of it. It was so eroded. I mean, the Sphinx now has had so much cosmetic surgery and restoration that it looks nothing like what it was in the 1800s, and God knows what it looked like before then. And so it might have been they might have built this underground for a possible asteroid near extinction event. I don't know, or it might have been above ground. That we don't know. So
When you when you're in that's fascinating. When you're in that chamber and you're looking at that sarcophagus and your keys go flying out and you know flying out and hit on the sarcophagus, can you describe like how deep you think you were at that point, and then from there how much further you think it goes, like from maybe through these radar analysis or otherwise, from that point, where do you think it opens up and how big do you think it might be after that point that you were standing there?
well, I can't believe that somebody hasn't gotten a little, blow up boat or something, or gotten a boat down there, a little canoe down there, a kayak or something, and seen where it's gone. And if so, we'll never hear about that because the problem with Egypt is they don't want to mess with the datelines, the timelines, because the timelines then start interfering with religious beliefs as well, and it gets murky. So they want to stick by that they're people with the ancient people. We built this and so forth like that. But I even the Great Pyramid. There's no real indication that it was Khufu that built it. He was known for restoration. There was just a tiny little like 5-inch statue found in there, probably by a worker who maybe revered the pharaoh, and that's it. I mean, if a pharaoh's like Ramses II, they plaster their names all over everything, and if they built it. And there's nothing of that nature anywhere. And of course, the Great Pyramid at one time had limestone casing on it, polished limestone, Tura limestone, and it was very smooth and very white. There's some early reports in the early 1800s that they said there were some inscriptions on it. None of that has been preserved because they just took it all off and used it in building projects in Cairo over the years. So you'd have to go find some of those stones to see if you find anything inscribed on it, because there was one report that there was enough to fill several books. So was this some depository of knowledge as well as a power plant? And then later on, because the capstone was no longer there and the function of it was unknown, that they used it for initiations and rituals and so forth. So it's been very multifunctional over the millennium. And it leaves a lot to question, but I think that the more we find underground, but I don't think they want you to find it underground. That's why they keep throwing all these things like, oh, the SAR, that synthetic aperture radar. No, the algorithms are all wrong. That can't be. And they try to poo-poo it.
Well, yeah, I was going to ask you about the debunking because, right after this happened, of course, people were like, oh, this is debunked. There's no city under, this is all garbage science. This can't be true. This is not true. But as you've said, everyone around there knows that it's true, and you've witnessed it even south of Giza and in these tunnels and the waterways that are underneath it. So you've seen it with your own eyes and documented it. So do you think that that's part of the debunking process, is that they just want to keep these timelines intact and they don't want anyone asking questions?
Yeah, I do believe that. We need some really new, out of the box blood, ruling some of the Egyptian antiquity departments there. We have an old guard there that is bent on preserving the secrets. And we may find secrets that even our government does not want to allow. I remember a friend who was working on the Bosnian pyramid when they were first found and excavating. She said immediately, she said all these government suits came, and people from Egypt came, and they're all, first of all, they don't want it to outshine the great Egyptian pyramid, Great Pyramid, but to look to see if there was going to find any secrets there. Now, Bosnia had a kind of like a river of mercury underneath it. And mercury is one of those tools that the alchemists use, mercury, salt, and sulfur. And they were the true alchemist magicians of the world. They were really, they knew chemistry. And probably maybe like we don't know it today, because most of that has been lost. So that's why when we get back to talking about the Great Pyramid, I do believe that it was set up to have some type of, it's a reaction chamber, to have some type of chemical reaction. There are some reports that they may have been gold mining there and processing for purification, or they could have been making sure that the land stayed more fertile during that time for farming as well. So, it's sort of like terraforming it, climate change,
Wow.
geoengineering, geoengineering
Yeah.
during ancient
Do you
Egyptian
think
times.
you're going back there in the fall, in November? Are you going back to that chamber? I mean, are you going to be one of the people that gets on a little boat and then, and heads down
I
underneath the
am
chamber?
not
I mean, how far
saying,
down does it
Clayton,
go?
I am not saying, to get back down there, like 150 feet under, I would love to get in a boat and just sail down that and see what happens. And when we went to the Hawara, there was moguls all over the sand, which means there's collapse. Things have collapsed. and you tried to go in the entrance, and the water, it blocks it. It's collapsed there as well. So, but I understand the Egyptians' fear of, if they excavate or do too much, they'll ruin what's already existing, and that's their biggest fear. It is the Egyptian, tourism is a pretty big thing there, and they don't want to ruin it, and they kind of like the mystique around it. So,
Yeah.
um,
I was in Cairo was it last year. I went to the pyramids, and obviously the tourism and all of the stores, everything that's around it. Of course, it's that's very, very important to their economy. Obviously, the Egyptian currency is incredibly hurt and in pain, massively in pain. So they don't need their tourism hurt any more than it already is, I imagine.
no.
Yeah, it's just amazing. I mean, just to stand there, just put your hands on the stones, and there is an energy about it. When you were doing tests, you even mentioned like testing the electromagnetic fields or just resonance tests. When you're standing outside of the pyramids, are you seeing like higher electrical currents just around the base or outside in the exterior as well?
No, I think it's mostly inside the inner chambers where it's been, it's accumulated in pockets. The first time you see the Great Pyramid, you're just awestruck,
Yeah,
And I've seen
it's
it so
amazing.
many times now that, I hate to say that, I've become, uh, immune to that first feeling. But it's even the fact is, I mean, there's no way in heaven that they could have built it with ramps and thousands of slaves. I mean, they even found, there was worker sites near the pyramid, ancient worker sites, and they dug up some of the bodies from that and found that they had modern day type of surgeries. And you don't do surgeries on
Wait, what?
slaves. You throw them away, you know?
I have never heard this before. Now, when I was there talking to one of our tour guides, one of our Egyptian tour guides, he was, very proud that the Egyptians built these pyramids. And they said, "I know there's talk of aliens and all of this." He said, "No, no, we built it." And he pointed out, we saw the village where these slaves lived, or the workers lived, and they would work every day to come home to these little huts, these little cabins, etc. And they would go back to work the next day, and it was like a little mini city that was here for years. And so you're telling me, like, within this village they found these
They were
bodies where they had
artisans. They were true artisans and stoneworkers and so forth. And you could see the bone showed that if there was a broken bone, it had been reset. And if you go to let's see, which is the one, Kamumbo. I think it's Kamumbo temple off the Nile. There's pictures on the walls of surgical instruments as well. So, um, yeah, I don't think you would waste the time doing that for slaves when you can just get more of it. So I think that story is not totally accurate.
Who do you think? I'll get you out of here on this, doctor. But who do you think built the pyramids? Do you think the Egyptians built it by hand with ramps and using waterways and canals that came right up to the Sphinx, and they were able to ship these large bricks downriver, and just they're able to pull them by camel and put them up very easily?
No. I, once meditated on it to see if I could see, into what was what. And this is what I believe happened. I could be wrong, but their quarries, there wasn't just Aswan to get the red granite from Aswan, but they had nearby quarries as well. They ground and pulverized. They had some type of uh, high process pulverizing method, and they pulverized the stone and transported the pulverized stone to the sites and set it right in place, each stone, like the slipcast thing. So I thought, oh, that's kind of interesting. When I looked at that, I actually found somebody who had recreated something similar to that, and it was very possible. I mean, whether they could use sound to lift these stones and anti-gravity, I'm not going to say nay or yay. If they were that advanced, they probably knew how to harness sound, and that could be very viable. Um, But, when we say the aliens did it, it's just an advanced civilization that we've lost a lot of their secrets, and they might have been way ahead of us. And just like we think that the Romans invented concrete, well, the Egyptians were far ahead of that. There were statues that fall over in Egypt and they're hollow inside, some of them. And I'm like, well, that's not all stone. It
Wow.
was some type of molding process.
Casting
And
process. Wow.
yes, yes. So, you have to question everything. I mean, I'm not saying I have all the answers, but I do ask a lot of questions, and I usually don't go for the narrative there, and see if
Yeah.
there's another workable, plausible reason around it. So
Well,
that's
that's our show's motto: question everything. Uh, well, Dr. Forty, it's been great having you on the show, and I'm thrilled that you've invited me to join you in November on this expedition to go beneath the pyramids and the canals. I'm packing my bags right now. I just got to ask my wife for some time off, see if I can get over there. No, I'm joking, of course, but it would be an absolute dream to
I
be
said,
able to
oh
do
my
that.
God, I don't remember that.
Yeah. Oh, you don't remember? Oh, yeah. It was the first thing you said to me right at the top. Clayton, you have to join me and float. I will be the one to take one of these like dinghies and float down underneath.
We'll get little water wings,
Unbelievable. Yeah. Oh, it's unbelievable. Well, Doctor, great to see you. Thank you so much. Where can people learn more about your writings and your work and your expeditions?
Well, you can go to the trinfinity8.com website, which has a lot of my blogs I've written about Egypt. But, a lot of my stories, my adventures, because I've done alien artifacts in Mexico, and I go anywhere where I can, find some interesting stuff. So I incorporated it all into my sci-fi stories called Stack's Library of Truth. It's a truth series, and you can get it on Amazon. And so, people who read it say, "Oh, I know this is Kathy's real story, and this is something that she just wove into this book, which is kind of like a nonfiction fiction book about real truth." So, it's
That's great.
to be continued.
Yeah. Well, we'd love to have you back. I mean, I'd love to be able to talk with you after your November expedition. Dr. Forty, thank you so much for joining us. Really a
Thank
treat.
you. It's been a pleasure.